but I wasn't the level of fat that people can say you're fat at the moment. I was the level of fat that people would say, oh, you're stocky or you're well built, but that when you lose the weight, they will say, yeah, you were fat. My last video, a friend of mine, Patrick, commented, I wanted to hear all about the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, but since you're not going to talk about it, I shut it off as soon as you stopped. A couple of things you need to know about Patrick. He's an idiot first, and he's just doing it to hurt me, and he'll never forgive me for not agreeing with him that Enough's Enough was the finest rock band ever in the history of humanity. If I ever need a quote from Deepak Chopra or Wayne Dyer, I just go to his Facebook page and look at all the posters of kittens that he has, saying great things like, before you wonder what tomorrow is going to bring, decide what you're going to bring to tomorrow. You must be the stupid, idiotic ideas you want to see in the world. So Patrick, this one's dedicated to you. I'm going to work really hard on invading your personal space. That's what I want to do. A lot of people think that the difference between type 1 and type 2 is that type 1 is insulin dependent and type 2 is not insulin dependent. The type 2 can be controlled with diet and lifestyle. And some people think that that's it. Let me also make a really quick little distinction here that there is diabetes insipidus and there's diabetes mellitus. Diabetes insipidus isn't related other than you pee a lot. Diabetes insipidus is a kidney disorder, and it's where you're just constantly peeing, and it has nothing to do with blood sugar. We're not going to talk about diabetes insipidus. We're going to talk about diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus kind of roughly, literally means that you're peeing a lot because your blood sugar is high. Mellitus from mel, actually honey sweet. So honey sweet peeing, that's what diabetes mellitus is. And type 1 and type 2 are both honey sweet peeing. They're both diseases that are characterized by high blood sugar. And high blood sugar can lead to a lot of peeing. But here's the difference between type 1 and type 2. Here's the key difference. Type 1 diabetes is where your pancreas is not producing insulin, and because your body does not have any insulin in it, the blood sugar is going up. Type 2 diabetes is where your pancreas is producing insulin, but your body is not reacting to the insulin. Your body's become resistant to the insulin. Sometimes in type 2 diabetes, your pancreas isn't producing enough insulin. But the key difference would be probably that type 1 is an autoimmune disorder where your pancreas just isn't working or barely working at all. And type 2 is a disorder where it's working, but your body for some reason isn't responsive to the insulin. Because of that, people look at type 1 as the diabetes that's just in you, maybe is influenced by some genetics, and maybe there's some evidence that it's influenced by viral infection. Type 2, people will pretty quickly say, oh, that's the one that fat people get. Type 2 diabetes is where if you're overweight, then your body stops using the insulin. And so they see that as the difference. I was watching an interview with, it was on Fuad Abiad's podcast, and he was talking to Jason Poston, who's a bodybuilder. And Jason Poston has type 1 diabetes. He was talking about the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and he made a couple of statements I really didn't like. I took them personally, and that's on me that I took them personally. We shouldn't even really call them the same disease, was the first claim he made. And I thought, why not? You have more strategies with type 2, and there are some things that are more likely to happen for you with type 2 that don't happen with type 1, but they're pretty much, in the end, the disorder, the problem is the same. Your blood sugar is too high. And when it comes right down to it, if nothing else works, for both of them, you might have to use insulin. My mother is type 2 diabetic. She has always been insulin dependent. Her mother was also diabetic, insulin dependent, and her father was diabetic, insulin dependent. Now that I'm bringing up the family history, this is part of my response to somebody who is saying that it's not genetic. And in fact, at one point in the interview, he says, they say it's genetic, but it sounded to me like he was about to say, that's bullshit. Because obviously there's some judgment, or I feel some judgment. I feel some judgment, even if it's not there. And when somebody says that we really should call them different things, I think that that person is kind of thinking your experience as a type 2 diabetic is different from my experience as a type 1 diabetic. I think one of the reasons that people will see type 2 as kind of the easy or the just temporary disease is that there are a lot of people with type 2 diabetes. I guarantee you know somebody with type 2 diabetes. You have to. Come on. I'm pretty sure you know somebody with it. Type 1 diabetes, a lot more rare. It's about 25 in 100,000. Actually, a lot of people have type 2. You're going to see it be everything from just something that somebody has to pay attention to and be careful about with diet, but it's also going to include, it's going to go all the way over to people who have day-to-day the same experience as somebody with type 1. My mother has the same day-to-day experience as a type 1 diabetic because her resistance, there's a door slammed out there. We'll try that again. My mother, day to day, has the same experience as a type 1 diabetic because her insulin resistance is so severe that she might as well not have insulin in her body. And so to say that that has a different name or to say that that's not even the same disease, that's bullshit. So the big question is, why would I react that way? Why would somebody saying something kind of like it's my fault make me upset? Why would I have an emotional reaction to that? You know, maybe I need to remember the poster on Patrick's Facebook wall, some cat giving me advice on how to think about life. I don't need to worry about somebody who might have some judgment. Maybe they don't, you know, I could be wrong. Maybe they have no judgment at all. So I have to think about, okay, what's my reaction? And why am I reacting this way to the possibility that somebody is judging me? And specifically, that somebody is saying, it's kind of your fault that this happened to you. Why do I react that way? Because my mother's diabetic and my grandmother's diabetic and my grandfather's diabetic. And then on my father's side, my grandmother was diabetic. My father's grandmother was diabetic on his father's side. So I had diabetes coming at me from all directions. And that kind of becomes the metaphor that I use. You know, it was coming at me from all directions. And I've said that so many times when people have said something to me about my diabetes. I say, well, you know, I stood no chance. It was going to happen. That's become my refrain. That's become the go-to phrase that I use. I think maybe my emotional reaction to the idea of it being my fault is because I think, yeah, it kind of was my fault. I love eating. I eat almost every day. And I've eaten for most of my life, multiple times a day. Okay, joke over. But I've always been a pretty good eater. And I remember as a kid seeing at dinner, my father would always get the bigger serving. And I would say to my mother, why does he get so much more food? And she would say, oh, he's been working hard. And so he needs a lot more food. He's hungry. What? So I don't deserve as much? And so it was almost like food was this thing that you earn and you deserve. And you get as much as you've earned. And when you get that, you better enjoy it. And you better make sure that people recognize that you deserve a lot of food because you're growing, because you're strong, because you've been trying something all day, because who knows what. So food became this goal that I sort of identified with. So if there was a meal that I really liked, I would eat as much of it as I could until I got so sick that I couldn't eat anymore. And that's the only way that I stopped, was getting sick. The ability to collect was a relationship with resources that seemed so symbolic. By the time I was a senior in high school then, my weight got up to 197. But one of the key things my senior year was that my mother had a heart attack and was in the hospital. And when she was recovering in the hospital, I started to think like, okay, my choices about food could be better. I know that. And so I started to cut out fats because I loved cheese and I loved hamburgers. And so when I got up to 197 pounds, and then I started to think about my mother's health, and I thought, well, what I'm doing isn't that good for my health, obviously. I made the very simple decision, cut out the cheeses, cut out fats. I dropped down to about 175 pounds. Now, it wasn't a low carb diet. It was a pretty high carb diet because I was eating a lot of pasta. I was eating a lot of cereals. I was eating a lot of bread. But with the calorie drop, my weight dropped. And it was actually pretty easy. But in college, that's when I really started to develop this reputation as a really good eater, to the point where people were impressed. Not just like, oh yeah, he's a good eater. Oh yeah, give him more, he's a good eater. No, now it was, holy cow, this boy can eat. And I remember going to Blimpie Burger, 2 quints with a large fries and a Dog and Suds root beer. Cheddar cheese on a Kaiser roll. And ketchup, mustard, and pickles with Tabasco. If I was really hungry and I really wanted to show off that day, yeah, sure, 3 quints, £1.5 pounds of meat, really no big deal. So I sort of was nurturing this idea of myself as a good eater. Got a job out of college, went to live in North Dakota. 15 minutes out of Bismarck, the huge, bustling, booming metropolis of Bismarck, Mandan. And there wasn't a lot to do there. I was teaching English, and teaching English doesn't keep you too active. Opening books doesn't give you that much exercise. Watching a lot of TV and eating a lot of drive-through food. Just after work, drive 15 minutes into town, 3 taco supremes, 9-piece McNuggets and a large fries, and maybe a fillet of fish. And then I would go to Burger King and I'd get a couple of double cheeseburgers. This was pretty normal for me. Eating this much was normal. And people started to talk about how amazing my ability to eat was. One day, I will tell my children about the man who could eat. And I came in with my bag of food, I put it down, opened it up, and somebody saw it. And I remember she looked and she said, "That's all for you?" Yeah. But that's like 9 things. And you're not fat. I was fat. I was overweight. But I wasn't the level of fat that people can say you're fat at the moment. I was the level of fat that people would say, oh, you're stocky or you're well built. But that when you lose the weight, they will say, yeah, you were fat. And this indulging myself and going to the cafeteria and asking for seconds anytime I could and getting known for having a big, huge plate of food, or going to the steak buffet and ordering steak after steak after steak. All of these things becoming a part of my personality also started to become a part of my waistline. And in North Dakota, I got up to about 245 pounds. And at 245 pounds, that's where you see yourself in a picture and you think like, oh, does my face really look like that? Or if, God forbid, you see a picture of yourself turned around and you see what your ass looks like. That's what's following me around everywhere. Oh my God. That's a real humbling experience. But that was combined with some pride. And there was even always that part of me that said, yeah, like, wow, I'm pretty big. But, have you seen my meals? Most people that eat like me would have to get one of those little motorcycles to travel around because they couldn't walk. Then, things kind of switched and my interests and my attention got moved around a little bit. And I thought, let me do that same weight loss technique that I tried back when I was in high school. Cut out all the fast food. And I found again that even if I thought, well, I'm going to eat as much as I want. I'm going to eat, several bowls of shredded wheat because nobody gets fat from eating shredded wheat with skim milk. No, nobody can overeat grape nuts. And lucky for me, my metabolism was able to keep up with an all carb and protein diet. I went from 245 pounds down to about 185 pounds, just with cutting out fats. And then eventually, I added weightlifting and bodybuilding. Well, maybe not building, but when you go from 245 to 185, and then you go back up to about 215, but your belt is getting smaller and smaller, it's because you're converting some of that fat into muscle. Not actually converting it, I know, and I was actually feeling okay about my body and my body shape. Okay, not great, just okay. I still had a reputation as a really good eater, and if I was working out, I can eat whatever I want. And so I stopped really thinking about what I was eating. And this is where I started to get into my dirty bulk phase. And when you're weightlifting, with bodybuilding, the dirty bulk is where you're going to put on pounds, and it doesn't matter to you if it's fat pounds, as long as you're putting on muscle as well. You're sort of like building up as much muscle as you can. And so you say, oh, I'm getting what I want, so I'm going to accept a little bit of what I don't want. And that kind of became my mindset. That kind of became my philosophy for diet and exercise. When I was in this dirty bulk phase, my body weight got up to about 265 pounds. But I was strong, I was doing dips with 45 pounds strapped around my waist. I was doing wide grip pull-ups, with 30 pounds strapped to my waist. I was bench pressing almost 400 pounds. I was doing 350 for reps. My arms, the circumference of my arms was about 21 inches, I think, at my biggest. Now, I didn't have the vein there, but again, I was softer than I could be, softer than some people would say I should be. But I was willing to accept that. It was fine. And my diet eventually became really simple. The only thing I was trying to do with my diet was to eat enough to put on muscle. And then I developed a shoulder issue. I think it was an impingement. And so I had to stop going to the gym. At the same time that I stopped going to the gym because of that, I moved out of the United States and to Turkey. The week that my wife and I moved from the States to Turkey, we went to Chicago and I stopped at a friend's restaurant. Rock's North Center is where I stopped. And my friend Tim wanted to see me try the Rockstar Challenge. The Rockstar Burger Challenge, which is a big burger. I don't mean big burger, I mean big burger with a pound of fries, a literal pound of fries next to it. And I remember eating that and getting really close, having a sliver of the burger and a little bit of the bread and then a few fries on the plate still, and feeling like that was a complete failure. And I had that image burned into me, the failure, my inability to finish a hamburger. God, I couldn't eat one hamburger, come on. I left the United States with shame in my soul. And so a lot of my time here in Turkey, almost every meal in Turkey, was focused on training myself to be able to finish the Rockstar Burger Challenge. So the local foods that I would eat here were actually pretty good training for it. A lot of kebabs, plenty of baklava, when they bring it to your house and you eat like a whole plate of baklava, and that's good. And so there's one dish that they call Iskender. Spoonful of meat, yogurt, butter, and bread, and tomato sauce. Okay, so that's about 4 kilos of Iskender. Can I finish it? And of course I would. And okay, can I finish this pizza and baked potato? Okay, can I finish these 2 hamburgers, large fries, and fish sandwich? Every day was training to see how much more I could eat. Somebody would invite us over to their house and they would say, we're gonna get pizza. The first thing I would think was, I hope you're not gonna order for everybody because you're not gonna order enough pizza. Trust me, if I was gonna eat at a restaurant or at somebody's house, and if I was hungry, there was this huge anxiety. I would get really anxious thinking there better be enough for me here, because if I get through a meal and I'm still hungry at the end, I don't think I can function. So I was working at a school, I taught middle school, and there were memories that I have and that some people still have of times when we would go to the cafeteria and everybody would be like, oh, I can't finish this. And so they would stack all the food on my plate. Food would be coming at me from all directions and it'd be piled up on my plate. And they say, can Michael finish this? And then, gone. Yes, I could. Now, as a teacher, you have a pretty sedentary lifestyle. I mean, you stand up for a lot of your classes, but just standing there isn't a lot of work. And you learn to conserve your energy, because if I have 3 classes in a row, I can't be tired going into that. So I got to sit, do nothing, do nothing, do nothing, do nothing, do a marathon of 3 classes in a row, a marathon of standing. And then when you're done, you sit down, you relax, you don't do anything, you don't do anything, you don't do anything until your next one. There are all these physical stresses that don't equal exercise, but they drain you just like exercise without the benefit of exercise. So my life, even though I was going to the gym, it was a sedentary lifestyle. Go home, lay down on the couch, dial up the food delivery, have them deliver a couple of pizzas and a few hamburgers, finish as much of them as I could, and then leave the rest of them to sit there until evening when I would be ready for bed, and I would finish the hamburgers, wake up in the morning, finish the rest of that one pizza, and drink my protein shake, to be healthy. Go to work, save up as much energy as I could by sitting at the desk, by not doing anything, not walking around, putting out the energy for the gym, and then putting out no energy for anything else at all. So when I hear somebody say, well, type 2 diabetes is the kind of diabetes that you get because of your lifestyle and your diet, part of me says, look at my family tree. Look at how likely I was to get diabetes already. Come on. It was coming for me. It was coming from all directions. But when I stop and I think about my behavior, and I think about my choices and my decisions, I realize, yeah, it was coming from all directions, and I was doing everything I could to catch it. If there's sort of a capstone statement, there's something to take away from this whole boring story that I apologize for having told you. It's that factors work together, and if you want to be able to influence a system, you have to be aware of your role in those factors. Some of those factors you have an important role in. Some of those factors you don't have an important role. Some of those factors are outside of your control. God grant me the strength to not quote that entire stupid motivational poster. But there are some things you can control, and if you can, learn what that control is going to do, and learn what that control is going to allow you to do. There's some things that you're not going to be able to control, and learn what you can do instead of controlling that. Learn to recognize the signs that you need to start controlling something. Learn to recognize when something's on the way, because this is what I'm going to talk about next time, which is the signs that something's happening and the results of ignoring those signs. This week is going to be the anniversary of when I went into the hospital, and Buffy sent me a message saying, it's coming up. What are we going to do to celebrate? And then she said, seriously, I think this is like the most important anniversary. And I kind of agree. I've been seeing for a few weeks now the Facebook memories that say, you posted this, or you posted that, or somebody tagged you in this or that. And some of them are pictures that when I look back, I think, oh man, at that time I had no idea. Whoa. And I have to be honest with myself and say, yeah, I did have an idea. I mean, come on, with the lifestyle that I've just described and the family history that I've just described, there's no excuse for me not to have seen what was happening. I don't know how I overlooked it. I don't know how I missed it, but I did. And it was a close call. Toes were right up on the edge of the cliff. They're right on the edge, so that when you move your toes, the pebbles like fall down, and you see them falling down the cliff. And I kind of lost my balance a little bit. That's how close I got. It's a weird time to think about because it's humbling. So that one's going to come up next. Stay tuned. Bye.